Hey, so here's one of the hoses I got from Deechworks. This is the new hose. I wanted to show you how I put the ends on. I do not use the expensive wrenches, the aluminum wrenches, so I'm probably going to put some scratches on my fittings. If you want to spend the $50 per wrench, go right ahead. They're aluminum. I don't know if they'll prevent all scratches, but anyway, this is going from the fuel filter, and this end is going to be a 45 I decided to use for the fuel pressure sensor. So here we go. As you can see, I have tape on there, and that's to prevent it from going all over the place and fraying. And I have the nut, and there's the ferrule. It's going to be going onto this line. First we have to get the nut on. You can see how easy that was. It sure wasn't easier on that stainless steel braid. Make sure the nut's on correctly. Make sure the nut's on right. Yes, it is. Okay. Now we can take the tape off and round the hole out and put the ferrule in. Now on the ferrule, I don't think I'm going to be able to focus good enough for you guys. At the end of the ferrule, right here on this end, there is a lip right at the very top. You want to push that Teflon in until it stops on that lip. If you push too far, it'll extend past the lip. It's right at the edge. It kind of comes up and then rolls around. You'll see it. But the ferrules go on this way onto the hose. Sometimes a lot of lighting isn't very good. You can see where I've got the stainless pulled away from the Teflon. You can see inside this Teflon it does have the black carbon liner, anti-static liner, static liner. I don't know how effective that is with anodized fittings. Anodized fittings, if I didn't say it before, aren't conductive. Let me show you. If you pierce hard enough through the anodizing, you can get it to connect. Otherwise, it doesn't just by touching it. Which means that this barrel touching the carbon liner isn't going to conduct to the carbon liner. So I don't quite know how they expect that to work with these type of fittings. If it was a hydraulic and these were steel fittings, sure. Alright, so after we pulled the tape off, we frayed the nylon. So I trimmed up the nylon. I singed it a little bit. Make sure no nylon bits go down inside your hose. Maybe blow from the other side, blow it out. Make sure nothing gets in your hose. So the hose looks decently round, not the greatest, so you can kind of round it out with maybe a wrench or something. You don't want to flare it too big because then you'll have trouble getting the ferrule on. I'm just going to press down on it to get the hose to butt up against that lip on the inside. So you can see here, oh, get a yellow jacket in here. Hate those things. I've gotten stung like 20 times this year. So if you can barely see that it's kind of extended past the lip. So that one's kind of on a little bit too much. So when I look down in there, this is really hard to do. This lighting is horrible. You can see kind of on the Teflon, you can see the white edge there. So that's why you want to get it cut really square if you can. Did the best I could. Doesn't have to be perfect. But if I look down straight on it, I can kind of see that white edge. I'm going to start the fitting on that corner as I go to push it in. And there it is. So you can see how the braid stops on the chamfered part of the ferrule. Some people call them an olive. Now we can just bring the nut over. We're going to pull the nut up. Make sure there's no steel on the threads. It'll make tightening it much more difficult. Pull it up. Get it going, and now we can put it in the vise. So I used some of the cardboard from the fitting packaging to pinch this in the vise, just so I don't mar this up with the vise jaws. Didn't need to crank it down, just enough to hold it. And then if you want, you can cover this with like electrical tape to help protect it. I found it really doesn't do a lot of protection, and then you have to clean off all the gooey gum. So I'm just using the wrench on it. I did tighten it by hand as much as I could. So got about that much more to go. And we're going to tighten this up until just about touches, and this flat lines up with one of these, so it looks fairly decent. This is going to be under the car. Nobody sees it, so you'll get lots of practice on doing it nice without marring it up. Or you can buy the proper tools, but I'm a cheapskate, so wasn't in the budget, and I'm already over budget, so we're going to do it this way. Alright, that looks pretty good. As you can see, it does put a little bit of a mark on it. What I found is, even using this ugly thing, if I don't clamp the jaws of it super tight against it and leave them just a little sloppy, just a little bit, it doesn't seem to damage the face of it as much. I won't even call it damage. I mean, It marks it up a little bit. So there's the DW logo. And I think that was from my goof up earlier. But so the fuel filter I have bolted completely through the frame with 1/4 bolts going all the way through the frame with a nut and lock washer and actually a nylock as well. I don't want that thing falling off. There's one end of the hose onto the fuel filter. Now these fuel filters are directional. The element goes in a certain way. How I remembered was I set the element inside the canister. With the labeling, you know, you in the English language you read from left to right. So here's a label that says DW 110 FF. So I know I would read this in this direction. So that's the direction of flow, and that's how I remembered which way to orient this when I put it on the car. You could write in and out on the ends in an ink pen if you want, but this was just an easier way for me to do it. And it's permanent. So that is the fuel pressure sensor that was attached to this white bracket on the fuel tank. This is the fuel tank. There's a hose coming from the feed of the pump going to this T. And this 45, even though this isn't what they said to use in the instructions, is what's going to go on here. Sometimes these fittings can be kind of a pain to get the nut started. I'm not sure why, but... And that zip tie is just kind of temporary until I figure out my clamping system. I know this T is going to be around this area because I only have so much wiring for this. So I kind of wanted to get it close to where I want it. This is the purge vent. I'm not too worried about that. This can come off and we can move it around as we get this situated. So then we just have to figure out what we're going to do with this as far as clamping. So underneath here, there's a couple of brake lines, which you can see right here. The purge line and the old fuel supply line, which that is going to the return side of the fuel pump. And we used a 45 on that one. So we haven't quite figured out how we're going to set all this up, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. The hose isn't super flexible. Not a lot of choices. I have no idea how Deutschwerks ran the thing because they never show how their test vehicle went. Anyway, that's kind of how making a fitting goes. Let's see this a little bit. Oh yeah, it's a little bit better. You can see the T fitting. So this is a straight going up to the feed side of the fuel pump. There's quite a bit of room up there for hoses anyway. Sorry, it's my air conditioner coming on. So all this is tight. Here's the 45 going to the fuel filter. And that little white thing back there, that's going to be my support for this. So I've got some pretty huge zip ties. I'm going to zip tie it on there. You might be able to steel clamp it. That thing is pretty solid. It does open up, so it's just a little tab on it. You can see that thing opens up. So I mean, some of you might want to run your line through there. It does hold it pretty well. And maybe use, have your line drop down and use a 90 going out to your fuel filter. Maybe you're not going to use this at all. Maybe you're going to remote mount this and extend this. There's all kinds of ways you can do this. So I just decided to do it this way. So let me get this attached up and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, so as you can see, this is a nice 1/2 inch wide tie wrap, and I'm going around the coupler that held that. It's a nice angle right there. I'm going to need one hose clamp right here just to keep that tucked up. Should be pretty simple. 1/2 inch hose clamp for this. The important thing I wanted to do was make sure that none of the steel fittings were rubbing against the brake lines in here. There's brake lines running to the back brakes, and also that I wasn't stressing the wire. So this actually looks like it's going to work pretty good. If this zip tie wrap, if it ever fails, well, I'm going to know because things are going to be dropping down. So I'm going to cut this off, and everything looks good. Nothing's rubbing on anything, and it's all pretty relaxed, which is what you want. So well, it doesn't look like anything hangs down any farther than some of the steel lines I see. I tried attaching a clamp to the return, and this angle with the tank here, even with my 90-degree drill, I just couldn't get the drill bit to not walk all over the place and want to bend just because of the angle. So I ended up putting it to the other fitting with a tie wrap. It's really tight. Nothing wants to move on each other, and nothing is touching any of the brake lines. That hose clamp did good, and it's pretty tucked up. I mean, it's flat with this cover. That might be a little bit lower, but it's still tucked up more than this line here. So that is the fresh air filter in there, which is in the cowl. So you actually have to take the cowl apart to get to this normally. I thought that seemed kind of far away from the glove box, but there is one in the glove box for the recirculate, I believe. Yeah, it's probably due to get changed. I think I'm going to change this. 17,000 miles. Yes, most definitely. So, yeah, boy, I could have made this a video all on its own. Anyhow, that's while we're in here, we're going to change this filter because I can see the fan back in there. You can see the fan blade right there, the white thing. You're not going to get to that from the inside of the car. So we're going to change that now. Let me give you the part number on it while I'm here, so you could have it. Part number is 922-34714. So we're going to run the line through that hole right there, and we're going to run the fuel line through this box to the outside into the regulator. So if you go through that duckbill there, or the dust ejector, you'll find yourself right there. And I took the liner out from the fender well, and that just gets rid of dust and leaves and anything that happens to find its way in there. Just falls out, you know, into the fender well, I suppose, and drains out water, anything else that happens to get in there. But we're going to run the fuel line through there, and then I believe we're going to try to go in here and get inside this rail, and then we're going to come out. We're going to come out right here, right next to the fuel filter. Here's the grommet. You can get these about any hardware store. I'm just going to section this, and it is a little bit big for the hose. It's a little sloppy, but that's okay. we're going to cut it to fit. I just don't want this rubbing against the steel frame constantly. So we're going to put this in. Well, the hole's now big enough for the hose to get through. It's not big enough for me to put a grommet, so I'm going to work on this a little more, open it up so I can get a grommet to fit all the way around in that hole real nice to protect that hose going through. Well, I abandoned the idea of running it up through here just because it was kind of too tight. Ended up cutting a 1-inch hole with my step drill, and it's just right. It's not snug as it hinders, but it's tight enough where the grommet's not going to fall out. So I'm just going to bring the hose up to the fuel filter, put a fitting on it, and this side will be done. Car's pretty dirty. Definitely needs cleaning underneath. Alright, got the fuel line hooked up, going through that grommet. And we're going through that grommet right up into this hole, right through the dust ejector, right out into the air box. And we are going to be moving this line from the inside of the air box to the outside of the air box. I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to route it on the engine, but well, I need the blower to do that, and I need the fuel rails on it. I'm thinking about having the lines run down to the front of the engine. That way when the engine goes side to side, the hoses can move with it without a problem. If I go straight on and the engine moves, it's going to be pushing the hose toward the air box, and the other one's going to be pushing toward the regulator. I don't think that's a good idea. I'd rather have some flexibility in the line. So I may be running these up to the front. Just don't know until I get the blower on and see how things look. Yeah, we should be getting that back soon, like today, and then I can start setting the rails up. So that's going to be coming up in a video next, most likely.